Want to make sure you never miss a new release from the official Creepypasta.com YouTube channel again? Be sure to subscribe and hit that bell to turn on notifications.
Night Shift Brings Out the Crazies by Nahima20. Back in 2007, I started a tech job with an IP phone VoIP DT1 long distance company. The company is no longer around, and honestly, I don't know how they stayed in business as long as they did. It was really a pyramid scam, but thankfully I was on the IT side of things, so I didn't have to sell anything. It was a small, typical tech support call centre. The customers would call in, or Verizon, Quest, etc. would call and say DT1 lines were down or outages. I was the only female on my team, having to prove myself and show that I can do anything my male counterparts could. It didn't take long, and the customers respected me for being able to handle things. After making my mark, I decided to take the 10-hour night shifts. I worked Wednesday to Saturday from 1 PM to 12 AM, with an hour lunch. And after 6 PM, I was completely alone in the whole building. The rush to get out of the office by 6 PM was insane. I couldn't blame them. But I decided having 3 days off was better than 2. Like I said, I was by myself for most of the night. I would have to keep an eye on emails and make sure I answered calls. It was a really slow shift. I would get a lot of video game, reading, schoolwork and writing done in this time. But sometimes I would just wander the building, walk around just to get away from my desk for a time. I would have the VoIP phone system connected to my cell phone so no calls would be missed. This allowed me time to go get a soda, go get food and so on. One time while I was up away from my desk, I was going down to the lunchroom to grab a soda. The vending machine was on the basement floor, and the basement had a wall of windows and one set of security doors. Same for the main entrance, only there was one camera facing that door. Nothing else really to make you feel very safe. I didn't like going down to the basement much, because the back of the building faced an acre of dark woods. There was a walking path to the woods, but for some reason they didn't install lights for the walking path. Never really sure why that was, but it didn't help with the creepy factor. Sometimes I would see animals run past, but other times it felt like someone was watching me. I always tried my best to make it fast when getting a soda or snack, but sometimes it didn't feel fast enough. So one night I was making my way down to the basement to get a soda. It was a slow, dragging night and I needed a little caffeine for a pick-me-up. I counted my money as I walked to make sure I had enough to get in and out quick. But out of the corner of my eye, I saw something dart from the glass door back into the darkness. I stopped dead in my tracks and tried to scan the forest, but like I said, it was just blackness. I felt a bit of unease and everything told me to turn on my heels and go back to my desk. But it was 9 PM and I had a fair bit of time left on my shift before I could blow this pop stand. I tried shaking the feelings off and briskly walked over to the soda machine and made my selection. The soda dropped, and as I bent down to get it, I heard a loud ping noise. It was as if someone had hit the glass with something. I stood straight up and felt the hair on the back of my neck stand up. I slowly turned around and was scared to see someone out there. But as I made the full turn, I saw once again nothing but darkness. I thought this was a good time to book it back to the main floor. I didn't bother with the elevator. I went to the stairs and ran up them. My heart was already racing from having to go down there in the first place, then the loud bang, and now running up 2 flights of stairs. Once I was back at my desk, I sunk down into my chair and tried to calm down. It was just one noise. I was in a building with locked doors and locked inner offices. I kept saying over and over in my head that it was nothing. I was relieved by that, but out of nowhere, I got the feeling of someone watching me again. I peeked up over my cubicle wall and looked around my office. Nothing seemed out of place until I turned to face the front of the building. Outside the first set of doors was a slender, tall, dirty male. He was cupping his hands around his eyes to try and see past the reflection of the lights inside. I dropped back down into my cubicle before he caught sight of me. He didn't look like anyone I've ever seen at the office, and it was a little past 9 PM. So there was no good reason why he was checking out my office. As I sat in my chair, I heard the doors shake. I slowly stood up and watched him pull at the handles of the doors. They didn't budge, to my relief. But, as I watched him, he turned to face me. His face looked bruised or dirty, I couldn't tell which. Once his eyes locked onto mine, he started to bang harder and smacked the glass. I was so scared. It was the middle of the night. I was by myself and out in the middle of this office building complex. I grabbed my headset and dialed 911. While getting the operator on the line, the guy was walking back and forth from one side of the glass doors to the next. 911, what's your emergency? The lady's voice was direct. Yes, my name is Anne. I work at. I need someone to come out. There's a guy trying to break into my office building. While speaking to her, the guy disappeared from view. I tried to look in all directions but didn't see him. I knew that he wouldn't just walk off, not with how hard he was banging. And suddenly, a good-sized rock came out of nowhere and smashed against the door. I screamed and went under my desk. The operator asked what just happened, and I explained that a rock smashed against the glass door. She asked me if the glass was broken enough to let him in. I didn't want to stand up and look, but she told me to look in order to know where he was now. I crawled out from under my desk and just peeked over my wall and saw a huge crack down the first part of the door. I sank back down and told her to please have the police hurry. She said they were on their way. It felt like time was standing still and I could do nothing. There was another smash against the door, and along with that, the sound of glass breaking. Sirens could be heard coming towards my building. It was music to my ears. I told the operator that the police had arrived and thanked her for all her support. I stood back up and looked over the cubicle wall, and the red and blue lights were flashing wildly. But the thing was, I didn't see the man. The top part of the door was completely smashed, and the rock was laying by the inside of the entryway. One officer came to the front door, and others were out combing the area. I could see their flashlights moving all around the parking lot. The first officer to come into the building and greet me was a very kind man. He was patient with me and let me explain what I saw happen. Soon, my boss arrived and checked on me and the damage. At some point my husband was called and told I would be escorted home by one of the officers. I took the next few days off and started to look for another job that wasn't by myself at night. When I gave my statement, I explained to the officer that the person could be partnered with an ex-co-worker who was fired a couple of weeks prior for stealing and just not showing up. He knew when people came and went. He knew where we kept the cell phones we were selling, not under lock and key, but under a desk of the provisioner. From smartphones to Blackberries, when they were still worth buying, plus VoIP boxes and phone cards. I went on to leave this job a month later and started a credit card machine company. It was an office full of people, still a call centre, but I felt safer, especially with the security and cameras all over the building. Like I said before, this company is no longer around. It was brought up by another company, and they basically liquidated all the funds that were worth something. Night Shift Gone Weird by Yellow Horsey 1. I work in a fairly busy hospital downtown, in the NICU. I usually work at night. During orientation, we are taught to be observant to the signs of a possible abductor. We were taught to look for oversized clothing, bags, and shifty behaviour. It was about 3 a.m, and I was sitting at the front desk since 11. I'm a nursing student, so I usually just do clerical work around the unit. I also watch the cameras to make sure no one is here that isn't supposed to be here. It's usually pretty quiet at night. However, it was already a weird sort of night, and this event just added a cherry on top of it. The NICU and most of the second floor is a locked unit. This means, in order to gain entrance, you have to pick up a phone, which then rings to the desk. Usually it's parents wanting to see their babies, and family members who are lost. It quiets down about 11, so no one usually comes in or out during my shift, with the exception of housekeeping. One of the security cameras is situated so I can see who is picking up the first phone. I'd been sitting here browsing Reddit when the phone rang. I glanced over at the phone, thinking it was a parent wanting an update or something like that. It took me a second to register that it was the number for the first set of doors. I picked it up and looked over to the screen. There was a lady in baggy clothing with a sling on her arm. I answered the door and said that she wanted to come in to find her cousin, who apparently had been brought up from the emergency department. I asked for the last name, and she unintelligibly rambled off something that I could only caught the first part of. Knowing that we didn't have any new admissions, I told her that we didn't have anyone by that name. I tried to get some information out of her, and again she said that her cousin had been brought up from the ED. I told her in that case she would have to go to labour and delivery and talk to them. She hesitated, and then said okay, and walked away. I got a really weird feeling from her, so I checked the sensors to see if there was anyone that was being accessed in L&D, and there wasn't. So she either was at the wrong hospital, or she wanted to come into the unit to do something a little more sinister than just see her cousin. I shrugged it off, and figured that her cousin was in L&D, that she would find her, and all would be well. About 5 minutes later, the same lady appeared, in her extremely baggy clothing and her sling. The only difference was that this time she was putting the sling on, and was using her injured hand to mess with something in her oversized sweatshirt. She picked up the phone and once again asked to be let in to find her cousin, and the L&D said that they had no one by that name. I told her the exact same thing, and that she would need to get into contact with her cousin and go back over to L&D. She got hostile for a second, and then hung up the phone. Whether or not she was trying to gain access to the unit for things that she shouldn't be doing, I'll never know.